The great Jim Bergmann. It is good to see you. As always, I'll start off by saying I hope you're feeling all right. Everyone on the WorkHero side is certainly thinking about you and your health right now.
Sure, thanks.
So you guys have had a pretty big last couple of weeks in measureQuick.
Yeah,
Congrats on the latest announcements.
the AI piece is going to be similar to what you guys are doing, taking the work away from the people that don't want to do it. The whole idea of profiling using the AI was just to take something that technicians aren't doing well and something they don't want to do and take it out of their hands and do it well for them.
Amen. And that's going to be a big topic for today. So thanks for joining me. Wanted to just take a few minutes and talk about a survey that WorkHero just ran with Brian and the HVAC School team with some really interesting data about especially the day-to-day realities of what it's like to run your own small business in this industry. I know that's a topic we've talked a lot about, Jim. You've been, for the last year and a half since I've gotten to know this industry, a mentor, a shepherd for me and my team as we get to know this industry. And I think we've surfaced some really important things we always knew to be true about what it's like to be a small contractor, but wanted to talk to you about this data today and get your reactions and then talk about how both measureQuick and WorkHero in different ways are helping with these problems.
Sure.
Awesome. Let's dive right in. You know this story, and a lot of people know this story. This is a small business owner, technician turned owner in the industry, Ryan from Southern New Hampshire, who I got to know well. Ryan, like a lot of guys, got started 4 or 5 years ago, wanted to own his own job and be his own boss, and has hired a few guys. He's achieved some success, but when you talk to him, the kind of freedom that he says that he wants, this dream of being his own small business owner, it doesn't actually work out in reality. He talks a lot about actually feeling like more stressed than ever. Is that something that you and your team measureQuick sees on the ground? There's a lot of changes happening in this industry, right?
Yeah, it's always been a challenge that a lot of technicians look at what their company's rate is, what they're charging, and they're like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this for somebody else? I should be doing this for myself. And they get into business without a good understanding of all the overhead costs and all the things required to manage the business, everything from managing the employees to managing the billing to managing the purchasing to managing their quoting. So redirected them from the things they love, like the mechanical side of it and fixing things and solving people's problems. And they just get a whole new set of problems they didn't anticipate.
Yeah. It's like that famous book by Michael Gerber, right? The Contractor E-Myth, where he talks about technician, entrepreneur, and manager. And it's hard to wear all three of those hats when you're the small business owner. You know this story well. And this is why at WorkHero, we know that there's a lot of anecdotes and stories out there like Ryan's, but we realized we don't actually have that much good data on what it's like to run a small HVAC business today in this industry. And so we partnered up with Brian and the HVAC School team and surveyed his audience in the broader industry and asked a set of questions targeted at business owners. I can talk through some of the findings, but just to give you a snapshot of kind of who we talked to. Over 1,400 people responded to the survey. We screened out about 75 based on what we thought was invalid data. Full geographic U.S. coverage, full coverage of the industry. So about 2/3 of those that took our survey were contractors. Anyone else we screened out after a few questions. And then of those contractors, or those that worked at those contractors, about 40% were in that general management or owner position. So what were our core findings? The first is that we see a administrative load as a problem in this industry, and we just talked about the ways that it can affect you. But we see this show up in the data, especially around 1 to 2 million in revenue. So let me show you this graph, Jim, and get your reactions to this. So what you see on the y-axis is weekly administrative hours. And then the x-axis is number of employees. So not surprisingly, your administrative load increase as your company grows. But here's the thing, and you see this graph spike between about 1 to 2 million in revenue. This is a bottleneck where usually you're a tech who's figured out a few things, grown to a certain size, but you only have some part-time help. Maybe it's your spouse in the office doing the books. Maybe it's a part-time dispatcher. And you have 2 to 3 trucks on the road, but you haven't yet figured out, as you said, how to departmentalize your business, how to set KPIs, how to really invest in technology in a way to scale your operation. And so you hit this plateau. This is the bottleneck we see, but what we don't have charted is how many businesses make it through the bottleneck, but it's not very many. By the time you get to 5 million in revenue, only 5% of all businesses reach that point. What do you think about when you see this chart?
You got to wonder where in the chart do spouses file for divorce, right? This gets crazy amount of overload at this point. When you're trying to get from that $1 to $2 million range, labor is the most expensive piece. So when you're trying to bring on a dispatcher, you're trying to bring on a bookkeeper, like they're all overhead. They don't bring a single dollar into the company. And so that's where a lot of these technicians really struggle. I'm paying this person to do this task because I can't do it. And all the money that I'm making, I'm all of a sudden giving away. You can't find people to do a lot of these jobs for a low cost, right? The challenge you've got also is you got to grow the business to a size where you can actually employ somebody full time typically, right? Because you're not going to find these people that are going to be willing to, this is where we say the spouse comes in, that they're going to work that 10 to 12 hours a week. This is actually very similar to what happened to True Tech Tools when I owned that company. My wife came in and did the initial bookkeeping until we got up to around, I think we were around 6 million when she finally got out of it. They put on another bookkeeper, but this is very common, and it's very hard for companies to grow because they're not quite making enough money to cover the overhead cost of the infrastructure that they need to get to the next level.
And so you've been there, you just mentioned that at True Tech, and you've seen this play out again and again in the industry. What is it when you've hit this plateau, you cross 7 figures in revenue, but suddenly the amount of part-time help you're getting won't scale. You're scared of hiring any more guys or growing because you're stretched thin. What we haven't talked about is what it's really as an owner at this point, which is usually you're working 2 jobs. You're working 40 hours in the field and 40 hours in the office. What does it feel like on the ground as an owner hit this wall?
Yeah, it can either become a lifestyle, and for a lot of people, this becomes their lifestyle where they don't own a business, they own a job. Sometimes, like you said, they own 2 jobs, and the only difference is they're working for themselves. So on top of not getting paid well for the hours they're putting in, you're taking on all the liability and risk. It can be a frustrating point because you want to grow, but you don't have a good way of doing it. This is where you hit that point is, am I better off working for somebody than I am working for myself? Because at that point, you realize it's a lot more involved from an administrative standpoint than you thought. But if you can get past that hurdle and get into the $2 to $5 million range, then it opens up enough revenue that you can start to get those employees you need to manage some of those things. If you really stop and think about it, the only people that bring in revenue in these types of companies are your service techs and your installers. And if your owner is your primary service tech at this point, then unless they've got an extra 33 hours a week to do the paperwork, the company eventually ends up going bankrupt because they aren't doing the billing. I've seen this happen. It's really bad in like the landscaping industry where these guys start their own business and they're going to bill somebody when they get to it. Months go by and then all of a sudden they realize they haven't billed somebody or they haven't. And then when they do bill them, the person's pissed off because they've got this bill that's 6 months or a year old. They forgot about it at that point. It's just not a good way of doing business, but it's sadly the way a lot of these companies get started.
Yeah, you nailed it. As the owner at this point, you're both your own overhead and you can choose to be revenue generating beyond the field, and how you manage that time, invest in systems, delegate. It's a really critical point that I think a lot of owners struggle to make it through.
And the quality of people that you can hire at that point, because you don't have a lot of money, so you end up hiring a lot of less experienced help sometimes. So you're like, oh, I'll just get a high school kid or something to help me. And that's great, but they're only a helper. They may be able to help you carry your tools in, but they're not going to run a job by themselves for a year or 2. It's all about cash flow, which a lot of people don't realize how critical cash flow is to these small businesses.
Yes. Amen. And we'll get to that in a second. I think that's a really important point. Just to underscore something we just talked about, there's this question of who's actually doing any of the administrative work and back office work in these businesses. Not surprisingly, what we see in the data is that if you're a small company, over 80% of the work is either done by the owner or the spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get into larger companies, not surprisingly, and by the way, I should have mentioned this up front. When we're talking about small with this data, we've defined that as between 1 to 10 techs, or 1 to 10 total employees. And that's the way we've cut this data to be really clear. This point about who is doing the work and how you're managing your own time is so important. I'm sure that as well, Jim. Here's another question I want to ask you. How do you think this bottleneck on the time of small owners affects their focus on quality and diagnostics and technical excellence out in the field? What's the kind of relationship there look like? I'm sure you see this play out.
It usually results in you just if you're going to maintain quality, you just got to cut back the number of jobs you're doing. You can't do the same number of jobs and maintain the same quality. So either you got to drop quality, drop the number of jobs, or work a whole heck of a lot more. That's your options at that point, right? Because it comes down to cash flow. It's very easy to get these businesses started because your wholesaler will carry the cost of the equipment till you get it installed. You have this window, but that lasts for about 6 months to a year if you're not paying wholesaler on time. Eventually they get to the point where they're cutting you off. Right. We'd see this a lot. I used to work at a wholesaler years and years ago, 30 plus years ago. And, they want to buy a furnace or something. I'm like, hey, we can't, you're at your credit limit. We can't give you any more. It's a common problem because and these guys they got to start billing or calling customers. Hey, can you cut me a check for this or that? I did the work a couple of weeks ago. I'll get you an invoice over. And it just came down to cash flow. It's like these guys eventually hit the point where their source of revenue is going to require somebody to get paid back, whether it's a loan, whether it's a wholesaler giving you the cash up front to do the job. But eventually it's going to break somewhere. And it usually it falls down on cash. Yeah, none of this really surprises me. The numbers I would have probably gone like a small company is 0 to 5. 10 is actually going to be a fairly good size company. I think if you were shifted to 0 to 5, it'd be probably closer to 85, 82, 85% of myself or spouse are doing it at that point.
Right. And there's so many, one of the things I didn't show in these slides, but I mentioned in other talks about the surveys, there's so many small guys out there.
Majority of the companies are small guys.
That's one of the reasons that WorkHero is focused on helping more small business owners is over 50% of the industry is below 10 employees. We're talking about the majority of the industry here.
Mm-hmm.
And labor challenges, we won't spend too long here because I want to make sure to get to technology, but this is a topic that you and I have talked about on previous webinars before, and not surprisingly, labor continues to be, in finding qualified techs, continues to be an issue. Interestingly, the data here shows that it's more of an issue for larger companies, probably because they're hiring more guys. But what I will say is, to your point about hiring helpers, like this disproportionately impacts small guys too, right? Because if you can't find good help, that means you're going to still end up needing to do a lot of the field work, but you're also trying to manage your overhead and cash flows. There's this vicious cycle where you end up just never really being able to get on top of it.
And you've got to remember, if you're going to own a company, you need to work in your company where you can generate the most revenue, right? If you're a service technician, you're not generating the most revenue for your company by keeping your books, right?
Yep.
Or if you're a good repair technician, but not a good sales guy, you're probably not generating most of revenue. Every job you go to, you're trying to fix everything instead of trying to sell somebody a new piece of equipment. When I look at this kind of stuff, especially like on the smaller side, it's not hard to find a friend or two to come to work with you, but your network starts to wear out around that 6 to 10. I'm guessing you just don't have that kind of depth and breadth. Finding a person or two is easy. Finding 6 to 10 people is pretty hard.
This is what most HVAC owners are reaching for, and the admin monster is what grabs them. One thing that really struck me after being at the symposium was all the small guys in the industry, the craftsmen. These are the guys that focus on technical excellence. They take a week out of their year to fly to Florida to learn from people like you, Alex Meany, and Chris Hughes. One thing I really care about is helping amplify the craftsmen in the industry by helping reduce their administrative load. And we're going to talk about ways that we do that. So here's the second core finding that I wanted to talk to you about today, which is that the small guys are the ones that are struggling most when it comes to adopting technology. So here's a basic question we ask, just, are you using an FSM like House Call Pro or Jobber or Service Titan in your business today? And what we see is that, again, small companies below 10 employees, only 45% are using any kind of FSM compared to large companies. Does this data surprise you?
Not really. Two things happen. A lot of the FSM companies don't even want to talk to people that are the tiny little companies. So it's a little harder to find somebody that's going to help you get a FSM deployed at that 6 to 10 range. And then a lot of people think they can run a business off an Excel spreadsheet and membership to Microsoft Office. And it's a very common place that people cut corners till again, because this is an overhead cost, right? They're cutting corners, not realizing that it's so key to visibility into their business. You can do that for a short period of time, but eventually it catches up with you. In larger companies, it's a system they have to have in place to manage customer relationships, dispatching, and manage other elements of it to for them to grow and also primarily, again, for cash flow and billing.
Yeah. A friend, Chad Simpson, who you introduced me to, told this story on the symposium. He was on a golf course with some distributors, and he was really actually struggling to make. This is years ago, before he's really grown such a successful business. And someone asked him on the golf course, what are you going to do this year? He didn't have an answer because he was focused on running payroll. And so this question, and now Chad is the one that's beating the door on just, we need to create more effort around KPIs, compartmentalizing your business between install and service, and really knowing your numbers. And I think that's something that we at WorkHero and a lot of other, this was a big conversation down at the symposium, is how do we begin to really create more of a movement around that kind of business management and education training for
it's a challenge because you can put these types of systems in, then you got to ask yourself, what should I be measuring next? And if you're not good at this element of the business, it becomes really like you have questions like, when do I need to bring on an employee? And when do I need to bring on healthcare or benefits? And when do I need to, how soon do I need to do my billing? How long does it take for me to get from the time I go out to a service call to get my money back? Even things like managing discounts, looking at your callbacks. There's all these little holes in a bucket that if you don't pay close attention, they're going to wipe out all the margin out of your business. And that's where it goes back to you don't have a company, you have a job, and you just have to own your job. And that's what a lot of these guys are.
Yeah. And so we see this pattern in terms of software adoption across not just FSMs, but other software as well. So whether that's QuickBooks or whatever accounting software you're using, or the load cap software you use, in each of these categories, we see that the small companies are underusing software compared to the large. The one that I would actually call out, Jim, that feels relevant, I would love to get into a little bit now, how measureQuick is using AI, is this last category, LLM or large language model, and is the AI models like ChatGPT and Claude that are available to so many businesses today. We see that only 3% of small contractors and 20% of large contractors are using any kind of LLM in their business today. How do you think about, we have this generational technology now at our fingertips. It's still really nascent. We're all still figuring out how do we actually apply this today. But how do you think about the opportunity around AI, especially for the smallest contractors in the industry?
It could definitely dramatically increase productivity, and it can also increase the number of problems you have if it's not properly implemented. It's a tool like Google on steroids. I always tell people Google's not an answer engine, it's a question engine. And same thing with large language models. You got to ask it the right question, framed in the right context to get good value out of it and understand what the limitations are. So it's really good for task-oriented processes versus thinking. Like a lot of people are trying to sometimes use ChatGPT to do thinking for them, and they find out very quickly that it hallucinates, it has other problems, it's not very good at thinking, but it is good at cleaning up your email, generating content for you for very specific things. If you tell it, act as my marketing team and handle a series of email messages to follow up with customers, to remind them about their furnace tune-up or whatever. It's very good at that as long as you give it some good context to work with. But it goes back to also, it's what are you good at in your business? So you can spend, with measureQuick, what I try and do is I put a team of people around me that are good at things that I'm not. I could spend months trying to learn everything about a large language model and ChatGPT and how it works. And I dabble with it. I play with it a little bit, but we got people like Ben who are really good at that kind of stuff. So I don't have to deal with that, or website development or anything like billing or accounting. I'm working at my highest level every single day, which is working on the structure, measureQuick, workflows, new features, to figure out how we're going to use these tools, but not necessarily how they get implemented in measureQuick, how it gets programmed, that kind of stuff. We have people to handle all that kind of stuff. So when I look at these kind of things and just think about some of these numbers, fleet management all of a sudden becomes really important. When you got a lot of trucks and things to manage. When you only have one or two trucks and you're a small company, it's not that big of a deal. Same thing with the payment processing, right? When you got a lot of people, it requires a lot more stuff, accounting, all those things. So a lot of these don't surprise me. Small companies, they're not using them. But when you get into large language models, our whole industry's behind. Our entire industry's antiquated. We have so many people still doing things on paper that it doesn't surprise.
We see only 5% of companies are using AI in their business today. Most industries are behind in the sense that we're all still just figuring this out. There's a powerful opportunity to take these tools and apply them to small business owners for exactly the reason that we were just talking about. As a small business owner, you don't have the ability to specialize and delegate in the way that you just described at measureQuick, which means you have to do everything yourself until you have this powerful administrative assistant. You can treat it like a college intern who you need to check their work, but the ability to delegate some of this is really powerful. And I'm really hopeful that we can help more small business owners take advantage of this opportunity, because we've talked some about AI during this conversation. The other force affecting this industry is private equity. Brian just did a podcast on this. We could do a whole separate conversation about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. A lot of small business owners who've grown successful businesses choose to sell to them and monetize that way. But what I would love to see is more of the actual wealth creation in this industry, which there's so much value being created, actually go to the people that know this industry and come from this industry. And that's the thing I care about. I hope we can use tools like AI and other tools like measureQuick to help keep HVAC local, which is the name of this slogan we have going on here.
It's super important that this is what this is all about. If you think about every single slide you have in there, it goes into systems implementation. So when do I need to put a system in place to manage my billing? When do I need to put a system in place to manage my fleet? When do I need to put a system in place to manage my marketing? And so the PE firms are coming in and they realize, wow, these guys suck at system implementation. So if we take this company, put some systems in to manage these things, there's a lot of profitability. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can capture. A lot of small businesses make mistakes with pricing because they don't understand the overhead cost of their business. They don't charge enough to cover their overhead costs. The key thing here is that this is all about systems implementation, and measureQuick is also a system. It's a system to manage the way the work is done in the field, the measurements taken, and how your technicians interact with those measurements. A lot of people like Chad Simpson found out he had a huge increase in profitability and a decrease in callback levels, and it all came down to putting a system in place that his technicians were consistently doing this, pulling out the same probes, making the same measurements, doing the same in the same diagnostic. And that system is what makes a business. If you're a small shop and want to make your business valuable, then you get systems in place that make it profitable. And this goes back to, again, Chad's a great example. He went from single digit profitability to deep in the double digits because he was putting systems in place that not only captured the money coming in, but also kept it from going back out.
That's really well said. We'll talk about keep HVAC local in a second, but I know you guys have done a lot about this, but as I was thinking about everything, all the new automation, like around the commissioning step and the scanning of the serial numbers, automation you just released, this is actually just going to help more small owners manage their time. Say a minute about the opportunity around measureQuick or other tools and how we can help more owners manage their time more effectively and therefore create systems and grow their business.
The key thing, like when we looked at, I read a meme the other day that was more or less along the lines of, wow, AI can write a song. This is so cool. And then it says, wait a minute, I want to write the poetry, write the song. I want AI to do my dishes and clean my house. That really resonated with me. And because when I first saw AI, I'm playing around with it and I was trying to use it for troubleshooting. And I'm like, this is cool, but it's really generic. It's really not that great. I'm thinking, if we're going to use it, what would technicians want to do with it? And I realized they wanted to do their dishes and housekeeping. We need to make it do the profile because nobody likes doing that, and it's never done well, and they're not getting good models and serial numbers. That's impacting our diagnostics and measureQuick, because if we don't have a good indicator of what they're working on, we don't have a good output to help them with the diagnostic side. Taking away the thing that technicians hated the most may end up having the hugest benefit for measureQuick because we get a higher quality of data in, and we're able to better assist them with troubleshooting. And I think this is where we got to look at how we're going to implement these AI tools into businesses. We don't need to duplicate technicians and make better technicians. We just need to better manage the technician's time. Only people that bring revenue into the company are the technicians. If using our new profile or measureQuick, I can save them 15 minutes on a job, that might be another 2 or 3 calls a day that they now can get to. Or if they're doing commercial work, it might be 2 or 3 more rooftops they can service in that same amount of time, which brings in better revenue because we're increasing technician productivity. We had a different of a take on it than some of the other people in the industry because they're looking at how do we address the labor shortage? And it's maybe we just need to better manage what we have. That's a approach we took. I know it's similar to what you guys are doing for small businesses. But the first step, it's almost like an AA program where you've got to admit that you're a workaholic and you're over your head doing stuff you shouldn't be doing. That's the first step. And then the next step is figuring out what systems can I implement and at what cost. A lot of people don't realize, like even with measureQuick, so we had people with $49 a month to use it. Oh my gosh, it's going to be $600 a year. I'm like, what is it costing you not to use it? What is it costing you not to implement a billing system? What is it costing you not to invoice your customers? What is it costing you not to make sales and marketing? Everybody looks at what things cost without realizing the benefits they're providing and that they're actually adding revenue to your company. Because in the case of measureQuick, we're eliminating callbacks, we're increasing sales, we're increasing consumer confidence, we're decreasing the amount of time on the job because, again, elimination of callbacks, we're identifying additional revenue opportunities and trying to maximize the productivity of the technician in the field. There's a small cost to that because we're bringing you value, but there's also a huge upside to that. We've seen companies grow tens of millions of dollars that have paid us not even $20,000 in services because they're able to fix a lot of the problems that were stopping them. Like these plateaus are very interesting because the first is probably your admin plateau. Then it gets to your billing plateau. Eventually you hit the point where how do I better optimize my service guys? Because I either got to optimize the guys I have or I've got to hire more. And so It's all about systems.
All about systems. Even while you're still small, the profile tool you guys have built is for technicians. A lot of the owners are still their own technician. If you can save that 15 minutes in the field, that means 15 more minutes to think about hiring or growth. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but I wanted to end on this slide. One of WorkHero's missions is to keep HVAC local. We talked about this a lot at AHR and a symposium. We care about this because we think the small guys make up the majority of the industry. They do the best quality work. And we want to help ensure that a lot of the wealth creation in this industry goes to people from the industry. But I wanted to just give you the last word and say, Jim, why do small contractors matter to this industry and what do they mean to you?
It's the bulk of our business too. And in some respects, there's nothing wrong with PE firms if they bring value in, but so many of them are not bringing value. They're coming in, they're increasing prices. The quality of work goes down. The quality of the company goes down. The reputations people have taken years and years to build all of a sudden become tarnished. A lot of it's just people coming in thinking there's huge opportunities in this industry. There are, if they're good run companies that have good systems in place that they can enhance. Jackson Comfort Systems out of Twinsburg, Ohio, great little company. They just got acquired by Sela. They were a great company to acquire because they already had all these systems in place and they were able to come in and say, if you need additional help, just ask us. But right now, just run as you're running because you guys are doing fine. If your exit strategy is sell eventually, you better have good systems in place for not only you, but also for the person that is going to acquire your business. And so these small companies are great from the standpoint of the quality of work they can produce for the consumer, but only if they can have long-term growth. The problem with these smaller companies is eventually these guys get burned out. A lot of them fail because they're trying to do too much. They're doing the wrong things. They're not doing what they're passionate about. And so I think that's where we're trying to put some solutions in place with measureQuick and like differentiators too. Some of these systems, like when you see somebody come in with Service Titan, it's a pretty awesome system. To a consumer, it's got a certain level of professionalism. We're trying to do that same thing with measureQuick, where when you're pulling out your iPad, you're hooking up your electronics, you're doing all this type of work and higher-end diagnostics. It's a differentiating tool, even for a small company, that makes them look like they're a big company. But it is really something we've been passionate about for a long time. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of value to, again, just understanding how important systems are to have in place, no matter what size company you are. And different points in your journey, you're going to need additional systems in place. It's really important that you understand before you put a system in place what the system's going to do for you and what you're going to measure, right? Because these systems, they have to be actionable, right? It's okay, I'm putting a billing system in place to decrease the amount of time between I do the work and I get my paid for it. It's a very actionable thing. But like with measureQuick, when you're going to put that system in place, you got to understand what it's going to do for you and how it's going to work. how important it is that you deploy it on every job, right? So that you get the benefit from it, because there's nothing worse than putting a system in place and then not leveraging it.
The name of the game here is systems implementation. But as you said, Jim, whether it's tools like measureQuick that can help with technical excellence and diagnostic quality, or WorkHero, there are tools out there that can help you do the things that you hate doing so you can focus on what matters. And that's the really important part of all this data that we talked about today. In the survey we ran was really powerful in showing that small business owners are really strapped for time. And so it's the choices that they have to make about how they manage that time that really matter. And just really glad that you were able to join me today and talk about some of these findings and to help more small business owners. And with that, thanks for joining.
Yeah, well, it was good to see the results from the survey. I heard that was HVAC School's largest survey ever. Congratulations.
We're going to try to do it every year, so we'll keep learning things. And next year, we'll see if we can get it out to the measureQuick audience too.
All right.
Much. See you next time.